Hello, everybody. My name's James. Welcome to the Fan View. I'm delighted to be joined by our Burnley correspondent, Jack Toner, following Burnley's sealing of promotion back to the Premier League on Friday night. How are you, Jack?
I am very, very well, thank you. Glad to be back.
Good. How does it feel? We should point out we're pre-recording this on Sunday night. Not that I suppose anything's going to change in your world between now and Monday morning. But how you feeling? I understand you were at Middlesbrough Friday night.
Yes, we made a full weekend of it, so feeling a little bit delicate, but no, the mood is good. It's been an amazing season, one that most fans don't want to end, because it is going to be different.
You're not
Next
going to win
season.
every week.
Exactly. So I think there's a part of me that is a little bit, dare I say it, not as looking forward to next season as some, but you've got to be in the best league in the world and try it against the best, haven't you? So yeah, overall, absolutely delighted to be back.
Yeah, I want to get onto the team and expectations for next year. And listen, you're obviously in an amazing position where you've got 4 months to plan for next season. To be honest,
Yeah,
I imagine doing research on your club that this has probably been going on you're looking at a 7 month period of preparation, really. We spoke to you, I think, in January, Jack. You
yeah,
were on with Tomo. We knew then you were
yeah,
coming up, basically. But before we do that, I want to talk about the ownership, because if we go back 18 months or so ago, before Dyche was dismissed, which you just told me off camera happened on Good Friday. Ironically, a year ago, you clinched promotion back on Good Friday. Feels fated. We were very concerned, Jack. We were really concerned that these guys were coming in, potentially using you as an investment vehicle, and a little bit concerned that rather than coming back, you might fall through the leagues.
yeah,
Do we owe ALK Capital a big apology?
yeah. I think so. My stance on it from the start was that I was very, very not impressed. But that being said, I think it's kind of been more how it was sold rather than how it was bought. The previous owner, Garlics, put us in a little bit of a tricky position because we've had all these years debt free and we've been a nicely well run club, keeping finances all in the green, to then having a leveraged takeover, which if you're out on pace and you sat there and you get that opportunity, it's too good to turn down, I guess. But yeah, I mean, it's testament to his vision, to come in and do what he's done. And he's turned relegation into a positive. I was sat there last game of the season against Newcastle, and like yourself, I was definitely more confident that we were in more trouble than we were going to come straight back up. There were odds on us at 15-1 to get promoted at the start of the season, and I didn't back it because I thought, I'm a betting man, but even I didn't think that it was going to be um, that quick of a return to the Premier League. So yeah, I did expect a little bit of pain. So for him to do the job he's done, and listen, had I have been in Alan Pace's shoes, I probably would have played it a little bit more safe. Your likes of Eric Peters, you think, is he worth giving another year? But the sort of the model that he's transformed us into, of signing these young players, and I guess a lot of it is quite statistically driven. We've gone out there and got some real talent that I've never heard of before. A lot of unproven players from Belgium and other leagues. So yeah, we've now paid off the debt as well, supposedly. So we're going 12 months on, going back into the Premier League debt free under new ownership. He's done a terrific job, really.
So is that right? Is that now because you're coming back up? That's it. The leverage problem's gone away. Self-sufficient again, just like
Yeah.
that, basically.
Well, they've not actually published the accounts as they should have done, which again is a little bit of a red
Are you
flag.
under a transfer embargo
Yeah.
technically at the moment?
So we are
Okay.
under a transfer embargo, but Pace has sort of tried to reassure us and said it's all above board. It's just a case of they didn't file something in between a certain time, which has meant that we're under this embargo. Um, which, it's, to be correct, it's an English Football League transfer
I was
embargo,
gonna
so
say, yeah.
it doesn't mean anything anyway, which is bizarre. Um, but yeah, we're supposedly now debt free. Whether there's been another, well, that loan has been paid off, unless he's taken out a different loan to pay it off or something. I don't know. But supposedly, what Kompany said on Friday was that we're going into the Premier League debt free. So if that is true, then yeah,
I
delighted.
presume you've seen Pace's interview on the side of the pitch at the
Yeah,
Riverside. I mean, to be honest, it's the first time I'd really since he did the original interviews when he took over. It's the first time I heard him speak since. And he was obviously overjoyed as you all were, obviously, on Friday night. But he came across quite well, I thought. He didn't strike me as someone who was about to sell Burnley up the river next year and try and make his money back quickly. I got the impression that there was a bit of a vision. And I think even just doing the research, it doesn't look like there was any great demand on you having to get back at the first attempt. Part of the idea of getting someone like Vincent Kompany was to overhaul the model of the football club. And if it took a couple of years, it took a couple of years. That seems to be what's being said. The bonus is you've obviously stormed away and done it straight away.
Yeah, and that's it. In his first interview with the company, he'd said it was a 3-year plan. And reading between the lines, it was sort of, if we can go within those 3 years, I guess they've probably budgeted and worked out that we could still sustain at this level in the Championship for another 3 years. So even listening to one of Bellamy's interviews that he did sort of about a month or so into the season, and he actually said it would be too soon for us to go up this season. He said, obviously, you wouldn't turn it down, but he thought there was, a more of a long-term project in getting these players, sort of more on it and stuff. But yeah, first time of asking, it doesn't get better than that.
Just to clarify, for those who are unaware, Craig Bellamy's assistant manager?
Assistant manager, yeah.
Yeah, okay. Is he bankrupt?
Yeah, we've got more money than him now.
It's bad. At least he's in employment. I saw that headline the other day and forgot he was even with you. Obviously played with Kompany, obviously at Manchester City in Kompany's first few years with City. So I take it everyone's happy with the owners now, right? Or is there any concern now?
I think there's still the odd bit, but the general consensus is that we are happy. Especially, and for me, it was the finances that was just the biggest worry. There's a few people saying, "Oh, he's a likable guy," but you're only so likable until the money dries up and the club ends up in a bad position, and then it doesn't get you very far, does it? So, I think the consensus is, we've been very shrewd in our business of, letting players like Nick Pope go was never easy, but when we see what we've got in replacement in terms of a new squad, just immense, really.
Arguably Nick Pope wouldn't have fit in with your style, mate.
No, I genuinely think if we'd have had Nick Pope, we wouldn't have been on the same points that we are now. We'd be worse off.
It's such a big call, that, mate.
Yeah, but I would put,
because as many would say, he's arguably been the best goalkeeper in the Premier League this year.
Yeah, I think it's the same with, like, Charlie Taylor's barely played all season. I still think he's the best left back in the Championship. Obviously Matsson's more of a left wing back and he's better getting forward. It's just a different style. So, if you should watch it back on Friday, Muric does a Cruyff turn when Akpom's running straight through, and he sent him out absolutely flying. And it's just like, if that was Pope, it would have been panic stations. He'd have kicked it against him and it'd have ricocheted into the back of the net. So
that's interesting in itself. We spoke about this a little bit with you previously about the adjustment in the style for the fan base, because the fan base had become so used to a philosophy of football that was almost ingrained in the football club. This works for Burnley, almost like an acceptance that if you didn't play that way, you almost wouldn't have been at Premier League level. But Vincent Kompany has shown in a year or less how quickly you can transform a style of play and completely just overhaul everything that we've known about Burnley. Like, if anybody hasn't seen you play yet, watch you against Sheffield United, or the two best teams in the Championship, Monday night, tune in, great FPL scouting, and enjoy it, because you're a joy to watch, mate.
Yeah, and that's it. I think if, for those people that don't pay any attention to the Championship, when they turn on Match of the Day, first game of the season next season, they're in for a really big shock, because it's a different Burnley to what we've all known. But my worry with pace and us going down was, this time last season, it felt like we'd lost a bit of our identity with losing Dyche, which is bound to happen after having someone for as long as we did with Dyche. But I feel like Kompany's kept the good bits. We still work really, really hard. We've still got a style of play that we stick to. Arguably out of the last 10 years, we've never not gone into a game where you think what you're getting from us. I don't think that's changed. It's just a different style of play, but we're still well organised. We've still got that hard work and determination. I seen one from Forest at the weekend, and your winger's just jogging back. It's like, that's never happened under Dyche nor Kompany. So there are comparisons still to be drawn to, but to the eye watching the football, it is completely different.
You won't be on that first match of the day. You'll be on the first Monday Night Football beating Tottenham. You know that already, didn't you?
Well, it'd
Written to the
be all
start.
right at the start of the season
That'll
because there'd
save
be no
me
snow.
Yeah, that's true. The game, mind you, if it's Monday night, I might sack it off and just go down the pub. To be totally honest, mate. Cast your mind back to a year though. When Dyche got sacked, I know you were pretty gutted. How do you reflect on that now, a year on, just in relation to Sean Dyche specifically, and obviously what he achieved for you?
Yeah, I think we've talked about it a lot this season, sort of in the pub and stuff before games. I think it's really, really tough not to compare the two. I think Dyche's pedigree would have been slightly higher if we'd have been relegated to League One. You turn around and go, Sean Dyche, take your hats off. Like, look at the job. It kind of makes his job seem a little bit better. But then upon, you reflect a little bit more and you think he's really created, the platform here for us to do that. And he always said, listen, I won't be at Burnley forever. He said, there might be something that comes up for me, or you might turn around and not want me. So yeah, we wouldn't have been in this position to bounce straight back up and do it. So yeah, it's very hard not to compare the two. Because it's just only natural. But yeah, superb.
He got sacked. Michael Jackson took over. Wasn't exactly a thriller. It went. Yeah, I'm here all week. You went down with a whimper in the end. That last day against Newcastle was pretty demoralising, with Leeds getting a result at Brentford. Did you feel at that moment when you went down, the club had fucked it up basically?
Yeah, I mean, at that point, I still thought sacking Dyche was the wrong thing to do. It felt as though Jackson gave us you couldn't have faulted the work that he'd done. He took us as close as he could. I think that last week we just sort of ran out of steam, really. It was just one step too far. But yeah, I think that for me is where you've got to turn around, and that's why I would give Alan Pace the credit, because he had the vision to sort of go against. I mean, there was murmurs from a few Burnley fans that was kind of thinking it was time for Dyche to move on, but generally not the consensus. So to go against the fans was strange, and it was more so the timing, because we'd lost to Norwich and didn't sack him, and then did it sort of on Good Friday, the day before a game, when we could have done it at the start of the week. So it did seem very bizarre. But yeah, I mean,
do we know if there was a falling out, or was it just based on football? Do we know?
They say it's just based on football and there was no falling out. There'd been little bits with Steve Stone, one of the coaches, saying that he'd been involved in like a bullying scandal and stuff. So I think the mood had changed, but I don't think there'd been a specific point of this was what happened and he went after that. I think it was more just results and just a culmination of things.
It seemed like there was no plan though. When you reflect on this season and we look at the fact that Burnley, would it be fair to say, kind of taking on a bit of a Brentford model now a little bit, where it's very much a combination of eye test and data driven in terms of transfer business, and the two need to marry, and essentially the principle is buy low, sell high. I mean, you made about 50 million, I think, on transfers last summer, the likes of Pope, obviously Dwight McNeil. You're going to correct me with a few others who left obviously last summer. Weghorst is still a Burnley player, interestingly. I don't think we're playing for Burnley next year.
But not.
The reason I reflect on that is the club looks like it's so well planned and strategically set out now. It seems like there was no strategic avenue to deal with the end of last season. There was nothing in place.
No, and I think it was because we were transitioning between owners sort of during COVID, and Dyche was very vocal that he hadn't been backed. And I think ultimately it was that changing over and that sort of probably 12 months where it was happening, where the previous owners wasn't spending the money, because it was, why would you, if you were selling the club? And then as we've come in, Pace, he's taken on the scouting setup that we had. There wasn't the players out there that we knew to go and sign. It was, it was always tried and tested, rather than going to a Belgium and picking up these, little steals, really. So yeah, I mean, the whole thing now and the whole method is, like you said, buy cheap. Josh Cullen, 3 million from Anderlecht, absolute steal. He's been the complete engine of our midfield. And it's players like that you turn around and go, he'd have been perfect for Dyche. £3 million in the Premier League. Why did we not go out and buy anything like that? When Pace did take over, that last season in the Premier League, we did have a little bit of a different approach because, signing Cornet and Weghorst were two that we've gone outside of the UK for, sort of thing. So it had started to change, but I think ultimately it was the lack of investment, and it had just gone so stale that Dyche was trying to get the same tune out of the players he's had for 3 or 4 seasons in a row. They were only getting older. And listen, 4 years before, everyone said, "Oh, what achievement it is for him to keep him up with the squad that he had," and the expectations were still there, and it had just gone really, really stale.
Yeah, these things do come to a end of a cycle. Are you prepared to have 70% possession at Goodison next year and get beat 1-0, mate? Are you ready for that day?
That's the worry. I did say when Dyche took over, I was like, that's 6 points we drop next season, isn't
it? Would feel written. Just quickly, do you think he'll keep Everton up?
Yeah, I think so. I think there's enough teams down there that have no real vision. I think Dyche will be organised enough to keep them up, and I sort of hope they do. Before Dyche was there, I would have gladly seen Everton go down, really. But no, he gets my well wishes. I hope he does really well there. There's no.
He'll presumably get an amazing reception.
Yeah,
if you play him at Turf Moor next year, right?
Yeah, and that's the thing, because he never really got a send off. There was no real moment where you thought, oh, he's going to get sacked after this result, and then it sort of came on the Friday out of nowhere, and there was no buy, and it was really strange from that sort of social media as well. It was never really talked about. Pace never really addressed it, and that sort of led me down the path of thinking that, like you said, it felt like there was no real vision. We actually appointed Kompany quite late. They were going through all sorts of, visa things or whatever for him to sign in all the paperwork. So there was a lot of the summer where I was thinking we need to buy a lot of players here, and we hadn't started it. And then all of a sudden it came together, and we'd had this amazing vision, really.
Let's talk about Vincent Kompany then. How long into the season was it before you went, oh my God, we've got something here?
10 minutes.
How soon did you know?
I said going into the Huddersfield game, because that was on the Friday night, I was like, listen, I expected it to be a hell of a transition, and we'd play well in some weeks and get beat, or we'd play awful and nick a 1-0 or whatever. And I was like, either way, I'm not getting carried away. I was like, a win or a draw, defeat. 10 minutes in, we was just in disbelief of what we were watching. But you knew that it was meticulous and it was planned, and it wasn't like, oh, we've just played well, but this won't be replicated. You sort of knew that we're onto a winner here. I couldn't stop smiling all week. It was just good to have that feeling back. And there was a few games at the start of the season where we dropped points where we shouldn't, but it was, draws, not defeats. We've lost 2 all season. It tells its own story. There was no patch of like 3 or 4 games where you thought, oh, we're out of ideas here. So yeah, genuinely from game one, really.
You've lost 2 league games you'd mentioned. Watford quite early on, and Sheffield United, I want to say it was on Guy Fawkes night. The only 2 teams to beat you since then are Manchester United and Manchester City. We're coming up to gone 5 months or so. I think that gives you an indication of where Burnley are at. Has it changed your philosophy of football? Has Vincent Kompany changed your outlook on what you want football on a match day to be? Do you go now demanding a certain way of play?
Yeah, and I think that's it. There's clubs like Burnley aren't gonna win silverware. It's few and far between.
Why not?
I mean, we might do, but I mean, even if we are, it's going to be a one-off. It's not going to be all the time. Whereas, you watch your team for 40 games a season. If 39 out of them are grinding out 1-0 ugly wins, I mean, it's tough, because the season that Dyche gave us where we got to the Europa League was terrific. It was aggressive, but it was effective. It got a bit tedious, but we go there every week now thinking there's nothing to say we can't win 4-0. So yeah, completely. It is a joy to watch, and it has completely changed my outlook on it, because I've always been amongst the opinion of it's better to go and watch you win, no matter how you win, than to watch you lose and play this attractive football. But yeah, if we were to take a step and get a Dyche to replace Kompany, there'd be a lot of groans with sort of we'd see it as a backward step, really, I would think.
Yeah, I mean, you'll be on a path where I think you probably respect. I mean, you've alluded to, if you win a trophy, it's probably a one-off. I don't think we disagree with that in terms of a domestic cup or something like that. But eventually, if you keep doing well, Vincent Kompany will go somewhere else, won't he?
Yeah.
We've seen this sort of thing happen with Potter and Brighton, and Thomas Franks being linked to some big jobs now as a different example. That's an inevitability at some stage now, isn't it? If he continues.
Yeah. And I think with us doing so well this season, I think he's at least gonna give us next season and then sort of take it from there. I mean, Pep himself has said that he can see it written in the stars that it'll be at City one day, and I don't disagree with that. Whether he would, I mean, it's really hard because if Spurs come knocking for you, and no disrespect to us, but you're a much bigger, more attractive side than us in the Premier League. So
I wasn't going to bring us up, Jack, but now we're talking about it.
It'd be hard to turn him down, but I think if it's a leap as big as Tottenham, then it's hard to say no. But
my concern would be what you've already said. If he was Tottenham's choice, and we do believe that Tottenham are interested, and that's not to say Vincent Kompany would even accept it, because the due diligence he did on Burnley, I suspect if he does it on Tottenham, he'll go, this isn't right for me at the moment. But it probably would be a difficult proposition to turn it down. But I'd look at it and think, he's going to end up at City. But then I'd think if he does end up at City, he'll do well with us as well. So, I mean, from your perspective, Vincent Kompany becomes Man City manager in 3 years. You've had a good 3 years, right?
Yeah, and that's exactly it. And we to watch us on the eye, we are a mini Man City with how we play out and the style of play. So I think it would be, if he had, like you said, 3 successful seasons with us, it would be a great pathway to go to City. And I think that's what stopped us with a lot of our players. And Ben Mee's finally getting a little bit more recognition at Brentford, which is nice. Apparently Nick Pope's got better overnight because now everyone's talking about him in a Newcastle shirt, when the games I've seen him this season, he's made more mistakes than he ever did for me in a Burnley shirt. He was absolutely superb for us. Not saying he's bad by any means for Newcastle. But I think now, like you said, the eye test, we just look that bit better. When the quality is probably still the same, it's just a different style. So I think Kompany would be much easier to transition into a job like a Man City, whereas Dyche sort of got talked down a little bit, rightly or wrongly.
How would you feel if he jumped ship to like a Palace or something?
I think he'd be absolutely bonkers because we've had the spine of our squad ripped out, and he's got we've 16, 17 signings we've made this season, and they're all his players. So for me, he goes to a different squad in the Premier League, and unless he's got that sort of
Control.
Yeah, the control and the chance to replace. He did pretty much the same thing at Anderlecht. So when he came to Burnley, everyone was questioning me and like, "Are you sure you're ready for this sort of challenge?" Because it really is a big challenge. And he says, "Listen, I know nothing else." So for him, that was just how he does it. So yeah, I think he would struggle to get the same tune out of a different squad without having to have different additions. So
what is the style for those who haven't seen you? Is it fast? Is it possession orientated? What is it? What exactly are Burnley? What should people expect when they watch Burnley for the first time?
Yeah, it's just sort of total domination, passing. We can get it forward quick, but I think it's we sort of alluded to our XG on the last podcast being quite sort of low. I think that's because we are very patient and we sort of take the chances well. We sort of Tomo was sort of saying that back in January of being like, could it be a potential that we dry up a little bit? And listen, we've done if anything the opposite. We've just continued scoring. So yeah, it's patient. The wing backs get high. Josh Cullen will drop deep and sort of slot in there. It's just total domination.
So wing backs though, primarily starting with a back four.
Yeah, so it's a back four,
but the fullbacks just bomb on, right?
Yeah. And it will sometimes be that they will sort of slot back and Roberts will go forward and Cullen will drop into left back. So it is quite fluid, and I don't think a lot of Burnley fans sort of notice it game on game where it will always be the same formation, but it will change a few times during the match where centre mids will start going forward and then they'll be backwards. So yeah, it does change around a lot.
Yeah, it's been described to me that Burnley don't have a system, that players have roles rather than he's defensive midfielder, he's left back. Players have roles, and there's certain phases through the game where that changes. How important is Cullen then? Because he's probably a player not too many are familiar with.
Yeah, I mean, he's been absolutely vital for us this season. He can be box to box. Sort of just speaking to some Middlesbrough fans this weekend, and I said to watch him, if you were a young kid and you watch him, there's nothing that he does that you'd think you couldn't do, where he just does it to such a high level. So it's like my dad says, his head's moving left and right when he's not got the ball. He's one of them that knows exactly where everybody is. And he plays the pass that you can see from the top of the stand where you can see all the space. He just sees space where others don't. So um, he's one of these that we'll talk about that will never be in your FPL squad because I had a bet with my dad and saying that Cohen is not going to score all season. He had one that basically came off his knee that trickled over the line. So he's never going to be a goal scorer. He's more the engine. But yeah, just absolutely superb for us. And he for me, he's probably the one that if he was to have got injured at some point during the season, I would have said there's not really anyone else that we've got in the squad to replace him. Whereas the wingers are a bit more interchangeable. We've got options in defence, strikers we've got, in plenty now. So he sort of has been, the key figure really.
So perversely, then, does he need upgrading?
I don't think he will, but I think we've already shown that we're not frightened of doing business. Jack Cork hasn't featured as much sort of this second half of the season at all. So I can see the number one sort of target to be a centre mid alongside him. Um, and it's sort of a bit more of an attractive squad to be a part of because we all knew under Dyche it was if the 11 won, it would be the same 11 next week. Kompany will rotate it. So even if we were to go out and buy two, absolutely storming central midfielders, I would still see Cullen getting in and out, and so yeah, it's a step up for him. And obviously he was at West Ham when he was a young kid, and they said he wasn't good enough to make the cut. So yeah, I think he will still be number one for next season, but I just don't know what sort of business we're going to do.
As much as Vincent Kompany is obviously new to management, if you will, I think people will want to go and play for him. By association of, it's well known already, the style of football you're playing. There's the association to Guardiola style. People will want to go and play for him. And the dream is kind of being sold a little bit in terms of, look, come in, young, work hard. If you do well, you'll get your move.
Yeah.
If a little bit like with Brentford, Brentford would have a valuation on, I don't know, Ivan Toney. And if someone offers above the valuation that's mad, Brentford will accept it. And that sounds like it's going to be the same with Burnley. It's not a necessity to sell. And clearly you're not in that position. You have to do it now. But if players come to Burnley and do well enough that a Man City wants to buy a Burnley player, club ain't going to stand in his way. That's how it seems to me, how I'm reading it.
Yeah, and I kind of hope we do that. There's been too many players recently that we've kept hold of past their sell by date, and to say that Ben Mee and Tarkowski both went for free is ridiculous. We've Hope sort of backed us into an alley that we had to accept £10 million from, which is ludicrous. So yeah, there'll be the players that we'll get decent money for. Albeit people can still sort of have their own say on McNeil, but he'd made just shy of 150 appearances by the age of 21, 22 in the Premier League. So £20 million for him was all right business. For players that young, you could accept more. So
Nathan Collins, of course, was another name went last summer. Yeah.
But a lot of these, Cornet and Collins were probably the two that went for the most, which were what were signed by Pace anyway. So the ones of the previous owners have sort of all run their contracts down. So yeah, listen, if people come in for our players, it's a weird one because we're not at this stage now where people would, because we'd ask for too much for them still not being proven Premier League players. But in 12 months' time, if someone's offering silly money for an Anas or Rory, then I say, take it and reinvest.
So in Gaffer, which is the championship fantasy game, have you been playing that, Jack, or not?
I didn't. After the first week, I wished I had, because I was kind of just so switched off to football really from the back end of last season. But no, I didn't. But I regret it really.
Well, I've got 3 Burnley. I'd like you to guess who those 3 Burnley are, even though you've not been playing.
It will be Maatsen, Teller. And
you're right so far.
Zaroury?
No, Roberts.
Okay.
Scorer of the winning goal at the Riverside on Friday night. Would I be right in saying at this stage, and we haven't got FPL price or anything, obviously, but the fullbacks, whoever's going to start next season at fullback, feels like it's going to be very, very interesting, subject to the price they
Yeah.
come in at, which probably gives me fears that they'll be 5-ish rather than 4.5. But your fullbacks, if they're in at 4.5, are going to be really interesting, aren't they?
Yeah. Yeah. 100%. With the style of play, it'd be daft not to. There's the potential of them being really high scorers next season. So yeah.
Roberts has 4 goals, 3 assists. Matson has 4 goals, 6 assists, but he's only on loan from Chelsea. Have you heard any suggestion that the club want to buy him permanently? And I guess Chelsea probably want to sell
Yeah.
because they'll be able to book the whole profit on their FFP accounts, won't they? As he's an academy player.
Yeah. We'd be stupid not to. We're not going to start with Charlie Taylor next season because if he wasn't good enough for us in the Championship, he certainly won't be good enough for the Premier League. And we're in, as you said, a really good position that they need to. They want, there's been rumours that they're going to have a fire sale, and he's the one where they've got a few players already in left back, haven't they? In Cucurella and
Chilwell.
Chilwell. So yeah, I'd pay 20 plus for him. I think he's
Wow,
that good.
really?
Yeah. I
Him and
think
Roberts good enough?
yeah, I think so. Um, Potentially a bit of an upgrade on Roberts maybe. But I wouldn't. It's not one where I'd be worried if we started next season with them two. I wouldn't be disappointed at all.
Centre backs? What's first choice at the moment?
Um, it's chopping and changing sort of every week. It Bayer is on loan. Again, he's a must buy. He's been absolutely terrific. The way he steps out with it, the way he's so composed on the ball, but also big and strong and dependable as well. There've been rumours saying that we have a sort of a buy clause for him that was some people reported it as low as either 3 or 5 million.
Okay.
Some say up to 15, but again, I'd pay 15 for him. I think he's also that good. Howard Bellis and him were the two that had sort of had the early partnership. The worry was that they were both on loan. Howard Bellis had a couple of months out injured, so we'd had Ekdal went in there and he was terrific. He's permanent, and Al Dakil's permanent. So they're again 2 young ones.
And he's played the last couple.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Al Dakil only came in for the one. Ekdal
All
was
right.
in. No, Howard Bellis came back the week before. It's been chopping and
So
changing,
he'll
but
rotate that even at centre back.
I think it's been
Again, he's
sort of
come from
down
the
to injuries.
Guardiola school, isn't it?
Yeah, it's been down
Whatever.
to injuries, and then it's been they've sort of kept their spot. So I think it will sort of settle down at least because for the start of the season it was Bayer and Howard Bellis every week until we'd had a few injuries. Just a point on Howard Bellis, I think we should get him on loan as well again because he's not going to play for Man City. Let's be honest. Next season, his development needs to carry on, so it makes sense for him to have another year with us because it's a step up for him. So I could see it being
And
him and
there's the
Bayer.
relationship from the two clubs. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if you looked at, say, a Cole Palmer for a year, something like that, maybe
Yeah,
even where there's a relationship will build between the two clubs. You could see that, couldn't you?
yeah, and for all the loan players we've had this season, they've apart from Derfishoglu from Brentford, we've put them all in the shop window. Um, you know, Nathan Tella was out of favour really at Southampton, and now he looks absolutely unbelievable.
Am I right in saying Taylor scored more goals since the World Cup than Southampton?
He had it at one point. I'd not kept up with it, but I think it was sort of 5 or 6 games afterwards, and he scored like four more, more goals than Southampton. That looks an absolutely bonkers decision not to recall him. He's been absolutely terrific since the World Cup.
Oh, so they could have got him back in January.
Yeah, and they chose not to.
But he's really kicked on in this second half of the season. Would that be fair?
Yeah. Again, there's been so much of our season this season which has sort of just developed and transformed. It started off with him playing sort of a little bit more alongside the striker, and then he went more out wide, and then he's sort of drifted back inside again. I'll admit I wasn't all that convinced at the start of the season. He sort of felt to me a little bit like Cornet was when he first came last season, where his goals felt a little bit unsustainable. Like he scored a few good goals, and you kind of thought when he settles down, I thought he might just be average at best, but he's really, really kicked on. The way I described him at the start of the season is he was good on instinct, but when he had to think about it, he'd cock it up. Whereas in this second half of the season, he's just really kicked on and looks clinical, in any ways. But he's that quick that for me, he's the one that next season the Premier League, even if we are struggling, his pace is that quick that he's going to get chances anyway. So
is that lined up to be a permanent, or is there an option to buy? Or
there's no option to buy as far as I'm aware. So the best thing that happens for us is Southampton go down, which looks likely. Hopefully they'll need the money and we can get him slightly cheaper. But he looks so happy here and he looks like he's really enjoying his football. So he'd be one for me that we'd have to go in and again, £20 million I'd be happy with. I'd hope we'd get him for less, but I'd pay 20.
Okay. What's his best position? Because I feel like he's played a kind of all the four forward positions. Would that be fair?
Yeah, he's not an out and out striker. I think sort of off the striker a little bit, playing
like
on the
10,
shoulder,
basically.
Yeah,
but just not with a technical 10 qualities. Yeah. I mean, they don't kind of exist in that way anymore, do they?
Yeah, like him and Barnes sort of got a good partnership going as well. Again, another nod for him. He's been terrific this season.
Will he stay?
He announced on Friday that that's it. He said end of this season he's moving
on. Oh, really?
So end of an era with him. He's been 3 promotions with us. We've spent 500 grand on him when we signed him. And he's again the sort of, when you look at Kompany and what he's achieved this season, is most Burnley fans had written him off. But to see some of the old guard like him in the lineup doing the business, it's like,
just wow. Shows and fits into this completely new style as well.
Yeah,
done it.
I'd give him another year. I mean, I think we all recognise he probably isn't good enough for the Premier League, but I think he's. And I thought we'd need more leaders like him, but we've let a few of them go. Like Westwood went out in January. We've sent Matt Loughton on loan to Huddersfield. He'll be gone at the end of the season. It felt like we were going to have days where that your young players like Maatsen are better than the others, but sometimes you just go, it's just not their day. We need some older heads back in and a bit more sort of, nous about them, but we've just not needed them the same. Apart from Barnes has been Barnes and probably Jack Cork have been the two out of the old guard that have really kicked on. But yeah, really, really sad to see him go.
It's worth saying, other than Teller, no other player in the squad's into double figures for league goals. Next most actually Jay Rodriguez on 9. Does that mean getting a new centre forward is the biggest priority of all, or do you see him continue to rotate next year? And to follow up on that, is there any way back for Weghorst, jokes aside, or is that really burnt?
There would be, really, because I think he isn't that shit. He looked
playing for Manchester United, mate.
Yeah, it's mental to think that we've scored all the goals we have whilst loaning out our third choice striker to Man United, isn't it? It's nuts.
Via Turkey.
Yeah. We've signed Lyle Foster as well in January, who has been our most expensive signing of the season, and he's looked the worst, to be fair.
Right.
So yeah, I think we've got Obafemi as well from Swansea, who
that's a loan as well, isn't it?
Yeah, but I think there's an obligation to buy. So I think with us going up, we had to buy him. So I think that was probably just something to do with finances, that it was a loan to then sign. Yeah, I think striker's definitely a priority. But I wouldn't be convinced to say that the new striker goes straight in. I think there is always the chance that with, Lyle Foster's didn't have a pre-season in him, so he might get a pre-season in him and become first choice, or there is the option of Rodriguez when he's back fit, or Obafemi. So yeah, little bit dangerous territory with who starts. I guess it's too early to say at this point.
Josh Brownhill's numbers will surprise a few from this season. 14 attacking returns in the Championship. People going, what? If he gets priced at 4.5 midfielder, that's fifth mid done, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, we'd have to see some of the other prices, because some of the wingers have been good, but he's always been that player for me where I've never really known what his best position is, because he's not a holding midfielder, he's not a definite central midfielder for me, but I kind of don't think he's good enough to be the number 10 in behind. Listen, like I said, we move around too much in positions, and it's more like you said, it's your qualities rather than your position. Yeah, if he's 4.5, it's a no-brainer really. Um, Off it a little bit the second half of the season, but only slightly from just because he was so good in that first half of the season, just linking up play and whatnot. So
If you were playing a cup final tomorrow, run me through
yeah.
what you think the team would be from back to front.
Okay, so from what we've got already for next season, it would probably be Muric. Well, it have to be Muric in goal, Maatsen at left
Is
back.
good enough, just quickly? You
Yeah, I
think he's
think so.
great on the ball, right?
Yeah, for the way we play, we've had so many goals that he's been involved in, so it comes from the back. Gives you a bit of a heart attack from time to time. I think we could have done with a bit more transition of having a goalkeeper that wasn't Nick Pope to go to him, but yeah, few heart attacks have been had in the Babylon stand, that's for sure. And I think just to sort of add on that, it's been the step down to have players like him come in has been great because if we'd have stayed up last season and put this squad into the Premier League, there'd have been so many mistakes from day one that the confidence would have been shot. Whereas I think now the belief's there and Company's got a real platform to work on to turn around to Muric. And if he has a clanger first game of the season, you can turn around and go, listen, look at last season, and you've got that to build on. But yeah, I think he is good enough. Although this week we've been linked with two goalkeepers again for next season, so so who knows?
Okay.
So yeah, him in goal, Maatsen at left back, Bayer centre half with Howard Bellis, Roberts at right back. But Cullen centre mid. I like Jack Cork personally, but he has been playing Goodmanson in centre mid as well, which he used to be obviously winger for us
Fit?
all season. Not had one injury.
Leave off. That's how I know your football club's transformed, mate.
But I mean, there's sort of something in that for me as well, because there's no way that it's coincidence that he's gone a full season without getting injured. So something has changed in the recovery or something that they do behind the scenes. I always gave up on him because I just thought he's in one week
And,
out for
and you're
five.
saying centre mid. Never seen him
Yeah,
play anything but winger, mate.
yeah. But he's one of the well, he would sometimes be the one that would probably he would go forward and Brownhill would sit back. So he'd been
Okay.
part of the midfield three, but he'd be more advanced. But yeah, again, second half of the season, he's been terrific. Great to see him back enjoying his football. Yeah,
So Goodmanson with Brownhill then ahead of Cullen, we saying.
yeah.
And then front three.
Heller, Zarori, and then I guess if Barnes is leaving, it would probably be Obafemi or Jay Rodriguez.
What can you tell us about Zarori for those who haven't seen?
Quick, really good technical ability. Stands his man up and takes him on. Can be quite direct, and I've never seen a player for us hug the touchline like he does. Like proper old-fashioned winger, just gets right at him. Will beat his man twice before he crosses it sometimes. Before the World Cup, he was really, really good. Sort of come off it a little bit because you know what he's capable of. But obviously he went to the World Cup, was a real surprise package, and he went with Morocco. Listen, he's only going to get better, but he'd be the one for me that we could be looking at in 5 years' time and going, he probably isn't going to be with us forever.
Yeah. How much of that 11 do you think is good enough to keep you in the league? If you didn't do any business, do you stay up?
I think so.
Do you think you'll have more than 50% possession on average next season?
Probably, yeah, because I think there's enough. Obviously, take away your big six. But even still, like when we played United last season, it wasn't in the cup. It wasn't a case of that we changed our approach. I think the style will still be there. We might get obviously, against a Man City that you'll get outplayed because they've got too much class. But I think that will be the approach. So yeah, I don't see why we wouldn't.
Yeah, a lot of United fans said to me after you played them in the League Cup quarterfinal, wasn't it? I think.
Yeah.
I didn't see the game, but a lot said, "Oh, yeah, they're Premier League ready, no doubt about it." Did the City beating you lost 6-0 there in the FA Cup quarterfinal? Did that raise concerns?
Bits, and I think there is a bit of a contrast in some of the fan base because some of the more old-fashioned people compare it to Dyche's old, and say that
Because under Dyche, you only used to lose 5-0 to them, so 6-0.
At least some things never change, I guess. Getting our annual trouncing off City. Yeah, I think, listen, City are, if they started Erling Haaland and Kevin De Bruyne against us, so I think we rotated three players, and we started up front with Lyle Foster, for Christ's sake. So I just think they're a real anomaly of a team. But listen, I look at that. We played Bournemouth in the cup and we beat them comfortably.
Yeah.
So I look at that bottom five and think there's not really many that I wouldn't be confident that we could beat home and away, and that's all you have to do. Really.
If I said to you now you're going to finish 17th next year, are you disappointed?
I would be, yeah. I genuinely think we've got a chance of sort of doing a little bit like a Brentford or a Fulham and being that team where I think obviously the Premier League for me is split into three, isn't it? And you've got the top boys that you won't compete with. You've got your relegation scrap at the bottom, and I think the teams in the middle aren't always necessarily the best on paper. I think they've got that extra bit of something behind the scenes where it's just clicked, and I think that's it for us, where we've got enough quality and a real vision and togetherness that sets us aside from the ones that end up in this real scrap.
All right, different question then. What do you think's more likely next year? Finishing 6th or finishing 18th?
It's a bold claim to say 6, but I can't. I guess it is more likely for us to finish 18th. I guess I'm going to be.
I don't think you meant that answer.
I'm always quite positive and quite optimistic. So
you watched Tottenham and Chelsea and Liverpool this year, mate.
Yeah, when I talk about the top 6, I don't mean Chelsea and Spurs.
All right. It's been nice having you on the show, Jack. Leave it there. Jack, absolutely brilliant. Many congratulations. My dad, I saw my dad today and he wanted to personally pass on congratulations. He met you and your dad last year. Please pass on our congrats to your father as well, mate. And either in Burnley or London, I'll probably see you for a beer one way or the other next year, mate.
For sure.
Big congratulations. Where can everyone follow you on the Bird app, mate?
Yeah, at Turfy Topper on Twitter.
And I presume I'll speak to you in correspondent week.
Yeah. Look forward
Good man.
to it.
Suji's back, everyone. Finally. He's back tomorrow for the Game Week 30 Game Week Review podcast. It just leaves me to say thank you very much again to Jack. Congratulations, and congratulations to all our Burnley followers and listeners. See you in the Prem next season. Cue music, please, Manchild.